A few years ago, a friend of mine had taken his 10-year-old son to it was at Applebee's, which is sort of like a bar type restaurant, and he'd taken his son there for dinner, and he got up to use the restroom, and then when he came back, his son was, a little upset, and so he asked his son, "Hey, what's going on?" And his son was like, "Well, the guy," and he pointed to this guy about 15 feet away, and he said, they had made eye contact, and the 10-year-old boy waved at him, and the guy gave him a middle finger. This adult male gave him a middle finger. So my friend, he looks over at the table, and there's two males sitting there, and they got a pitcher of beer, they're drinking, and he contemplated what to do, and he made the decision to finish his meal with his son and then leave. And he's like, "Saad, I feel like maybe I let my son down. But it didn't seem worth it to escalate it." And he asked me my thoughts about what he should have done. And I am Saad al-Aziz, the owner and head instructor of Semper Fortis jiu-jitsu here in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm here to tackle this week's question of the week. So, a little bit about my friend. He's former military. He's a very experienced martial artist, very good at hand-to-hand fighting. And he also was carrying a weapon while he was in the restaurant. So he was very confident that if there was a conflict, he could win it. And he asked, what I thought about him not escalating the situation. And my thoughts are, my friend was absolutely right in what he did. And I know there's people going to be watching this video like, "Oh no, you should have defended your son's honor. You should have confronted those two guys. Blah, 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 blah." There's all these Facebook, YouTube, social media warriors, that would be like, "I'd see red and bodies would start hitting the floor." And that's great. But is that where we really want to go? And what we have to look at is risk reward in everything we do. When we're contemplating escalating a situation to possible violence. And what I mean by risk reward is, what was the best possible outcome had my friend got up and confronted this guy about making an obscene gesture towards his son? What was the best possible outcome? I think it's reasonable to say the best possible outcome is the guy would see the error of his ways and be like, "Man, I apologize for the gesture. It was very inappropriate." And you would go back to eating your meal and it'd all be done. That's the best case scenario that I can see. Is that likely? One, he's with a friend, so people rarely do want to admit they're wrong or back down when in the presence of a friend. Two, this person has been drinking alcohol, and people make some terrible decisions drinking alcohol. And that's why it's so common, the whole bar fight is so common, because people get a little alcohol in them. Next thing you know, they think, "Hey, I could fight like Joe Louis." Three, this person that made the obscene gesture has already shown that he's a dirtbag human being. Like, adults do not make obscene gestures to 10-year-old kids. Like, that's just... So what's the likelihood of confronting this guy and getting the apology? I would say probably not very likely. So that's the uppercase reward. You get an apology, your son would feel better, you've made the world right. The risk. What is the risk? The risk is it's going to escalate into a fight. And I already said, my friend's a very good fighter, and my friend is armed. But if you're going to fight one, there's a good chance you're going to end up fighting two. So now you're in a fight with one or two. Worst case scenario, it's both. My friend still felt confident that he could win. It's like, okay. But if you win What does that lead to? Maybe they pull out a weapon. Now you pull out a weapon. Now, either you're dead, which is going to be incredibly traumatic for your child, or they're dead, which would also be incredibly traumatic for your child to witness all this. And then now you're going to jail. And somebody's going to have to come pick up your son. So this is going to be incredibly traumatic for your child. And I think what happens is when we choose violence, sometimes we don't think through this whole process. Or when we choose to escalate, like think through the whole process, and nothing good is going to come of this. And also, when I say you're going to go to jail, like you're going to be charged with murder. You know, maybe manslaughter. I'm not a lawyer. But the question is, one, we all know murder is illegal. We all know assault and battery is illegal. But you can do that in self-defense. However, self-defense as in you are in imminent danger. Was my friend and his 10-year-old son in imminent danger at the restaurant? And the answer is no. They were not in imminent danger. These two guys did not escalate the situation. There was no words. There was no, escalation on their part. So my friend was not in imminent danger. He was not in any danger. So he would not be justified in using violence against the person that used the obscene gesture. Because as offensive as it is, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, and I don't want to get into this debate, freedom of speech, freedom of expression are legally protected. Now, there may be some local law or ordinance that says, oh, you can't make an obscene gesture to a child, but you're still not going to be able to use violence against that person and be justified. You can go to jail for that. So keep that in mind. So this is how it would get bad. And we're looking at best case scenario, worst case scenario. Best case scenario, they apologize. Worst case scenario, you're going to jail or you die. Or one of them dies. Nothing good's happening out of this. And people mistakenly think, oh, well, common sense, you should be able to protect your son, you should be able to protect yourself. But you're not in imminent danger, so no, you can't do that. And in fact, speaking of imminent danger, crazy case in, I think it's in Florida, but it's in the past couple weeks. A guy, he's being charged, I believe it was second-degree murder. And what happened was, he was in his house, and a guy shot bullets into this person's house, and then fled on foot. So this person got out of their house, jumped into their car, went down the street chasing the shooter who's fleeing on foot, runs him over, gets out. He says, to administer a beating or whatever. But by hitting him, the shooter with the car, the shooter is dead. And there'll be people, and when I first heard that case, I was like, well, what's wrong with that? Like, the person tried to kill him. So yeah, he got him back. Well, the problem is when he got him back, this person who was driving the car was not in imminent danger. The criminal had fled. So he was no longer shooting into your house. The criminal had fled. Now, will his lawyers make a case that, it was imminent danger because he thought this person could come back? I don't know how that case is going to work. But at first glance, and when you talk to most people, they'd be like, yeah, he was justified in running that shooter over. But what you look at as common sense does not equal law, the legality of your action. So you should talk to a lawyer on some of your ideas on self-defense. Because I'm not a lawyer, but we can just look at case after case throughout the nation, and each state is going to have different laws as to whether stand your ground is even legitimate. Like, that's not in every state. In some states, you have an obligation to flee violence and are only able to defend yourself if you can no longer flee. So, hey, just because you think this is the right thing to do does not mean that legally it's going to be the right thing to do. And you're going to have to defend yourself in court. There's going to be a lot of expenses. So back to my friend, the best case scenario was him and his son were going to get an apology. Worst case scenario, somebody's dying and you're going to jail, unless you was the one that died. And when you do that risk reward, that doesn't weigh out, like it's not even close. The risk is so much greater than the possible reward that a logical, sane, reasonable person should say, no, it is not worth the confrontation to escalate it. And plus, think about the example you're setting for your child, that, words, don't let things go. Don't insults justify violence. And because the next time your son gets into a fight in school, you'd be like, well, why did you punch little Billy? Well, little Billy said something bad to me. And the school's going to suspend your son for that, or maybe expel him. And, you wouldn't have any moral high ground with your child if they just watched you do something similar and do violence over words and insults. So my friend did the right thing. And I share that with you because we've talked about self-defense in a number of videos here. And I think a lot of people who train martial arts, or just people in general, may think a situation justifies violence, but it really doesn't. And you want to really look into it and weigh the risk reward before you escalate a situation. So that's my answer to this week's question of the week. If you got a question for next week, feel free to fire below. And as always, make your comments and share your insights, and we can all learn. Cool.